Okay. Okay, we are live. We are live. At least that's what my StreamYard says. So we'll see if anybody hops in. If not, still the merrier. We're doing a bit of a longer form, just kind of a free agency focus episode for an hour or so ahead of free agency really kicking into gear on Monday. Already just saw to start the show in preparation. We've got Baker, Baker back in Tampa. I think what everybody sort of knew was coming where it was trending. They bring in Liam Cohen. That was just what made sense. That's just what made sense with Baker. And it's nice. It's nice when you have him and Mike Evans running it back. But when we think of just the quarterback position in general for free agency, there's really one big player as a true free agent, and it's Kirk Cousins, obviously. And so when you think about Kirk Cousins and where he may or may not go, I mean, all signs either point to him staying in Atlanta or staying in Minnesota, correct that, staying in Minnesota, or or going to Atlanta. And so my question for you guys is, or does Kirk's value go up if he's in Atlanta as that massive banner? I think Kirk's value is going to go up if he goes in Atlanta just because of the sheer just change of scenery and that value bump in and of itself. You think about just that appeal of a change in things, change for fantasy players for the most part, I think is good for free agency. They react very positively, very favorably. At least the community does, in my view, especially if you are the quarterback, if you are the driver, and if you're going to a place that has some weapons like the Bijans of the world, like the Drake Londons, Kyle Pitts, right? And so just looking at, your keep trade cut with Kirk, you're looking at a guy that's just kind of hanging in around QB 24. So a QB 20 top 25 quarterback in Dynasty relatively. And you think about, okay, goes from having Justin Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell, of course, Jordan Addison, a pretty stable, a pretty nice Minnesota system. And so what happens, goes to Atlanta. I don't know how to feel. I don't know how to really view that situation. I think for the most part, it should be viewed in a favorable light, in a positive way, because look at Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson. Look, they're honestly from that same tree as Kevin O'Connell. It all leads kind of just go back, trace back toward Shanahan and McVay. So it's not even going to be, I feel, that big of a deviation. I feel like in some way, shape, or form, that's part of the real pull and the appeal on both sides with Kirk and Atlanta is there's that underlying sense of familiarity that, okay, we're going to be able to really just kind of work with this guy. Like we can totally move forward in that sense. We're not going to have to completely reinvent the wheel, what we've been accustomed to, can kind of hit the ground running and really look, I think have a great chance to win that division. So that's kind of the 2 cents on Kirk. There's really not another team mentioning, I don't feel, because look, if there was, we would have heard something, I feel like at this point, you know? Moving on though to running back and everybody's favorite position, right? If we think about, especially look, running backs, Bijan, Jameer Gibbs, that's the whole notion of a first contract. These guys don't hit until, in theory, they don't hit free agency until they've kind of gone past their useful, as dark as it sounds, their useful life according to NFL teams in a sense. The tread on the tire is just the sheer amount of volume that they've may or may not have gotten. But teams more often than not, you want to utilize that rookie deal. And so when you think about, okay, well, these older running backs hit the market, but at the end of the day, in a position that's so suppressed in dynasty managers' eyes, why not really embrace where these older quote unquote running backs, where these older running backs end up going to? And so I look at obviously Saquon being kind of the crop, the prize of this running back class. And you're looking at the Eagles. My birds go birds there. You're looking at the Eagles, you're looking at the Texans, the Ravens have been rumored. I think both all three of those are very, very good landing spots and potential team fits. I really don't think, especially for Saquon, look, there isn't going to be a bad fit. I mean, think about the perception of Saquon in there over at the Meadowlands in Jersey, but really New York, right, with the Giants. Had a great kind of first year or so, really awesome season, but then things, the situation just kind of a stench around that whole organization, the whole franchise, and just not great perception, not great, really overwhelmingly positive things. Although Saquon holds that name brand value in and of itself to the point where he has transcended a very bad situation. And so I look at any change in scenery for Saquon. I mean, that's very positive for him and very positive in the minds of dynasty players. I mean, to the point where, I mean, you're looking at RB 10 right on the dot, give or take. I mean, he's definitely not going to dip. There's no way he dips below an RB10 type of valuation in the community's eyes for my money. And really, look, I think depending on the team, and look, I haven't even mentioned maybe the Bills or the Chiefs. I mean, Saquon walks in as the quote unquote bell cow, as modern as that term can get, maybe 70%, give or take, of the snaps of whatever offense, of whatever team he goes to. You know that he's going to get that significant contract, which is just so hard to come by in this modern NFL. And particularly, you look at how good the 49ers have been, right? How CMC, I've seen this comparison go around, how CMC has been such a key cog for that team. I mean, Saquon can have that similar type of role. And I hope he goes to, a playoff contender. And I feel like that's in some way, shape, or form, that's going to be some of his underlying motivation, you know? I've been seeing, a lot of his friends are Eagles fans. He in and around this area, right? Pretty much all his life. So that would be awesome, right? But it's not really this end all be all for Saquon whatsoever, for my money. So it, really, when I look at his market value with Saquon right now, RB10, I mean, I only see the potential to really go up, honestly, as high as RB7, RB8, depending on that landing spot bump and that just perception. He goes to a good team, a competent offense. I mean, what's keeping him from jumping? A Ken Walker, a ETN, honestly, a Kyron, even. So that's really intriguing with Saquon. I think it's just, get a fresh change of scenery from that Giants team and that organization and just kind of run with it. And where I think it's just the point being, it's going to be eaten up by the dynasty community and fantasy players in general. So you go past Saquon, you still have a Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, he is on effectively the wrong side of 30. But if anyone should just have you should have that age is just a number mentality, I think it's with King Henry. And you hear Dallas, the Ravens being players for Derrick Henry. I mean, again, he's a guy with the situation he was in with Tennessee. And it was awesome. He had some awesome years for the most part. But especially with him and where he is at in his career, he wants to win some games. I think, I'm pretty sure, you can search for quotes, recent reports. He said as much or indicated as much. I mean, the guy wants to win. So he goes to a contender who is certainly going to give him some meaningful money. I think maybe it's just a 1 year deal. Okay. Maybe it's just a 1 year deal. But you can rest assured they are going to utilize him for all he has in that year. And on a competent team, on a better team relative to the Titans and what they have been, although, in that AFC South, it's looking pretty much wide open for the foreseeable future, just hasn't quite been great for Henry's value, in my books. So you look at an RB30 in and around that range right now. Look, I can see Derrick Henry, he easily goes up to a top 25 guy. I think, really close. I mean, already basically for me in that quote unquote tier with these older guys like a Kamara, right? So I think he easily shoots up a handful of spots from this, in and around this RB30 type community valuation. For Josh Jacobs, we're talking a guy that's much younger, right? A much younger player who just right in and around 26 years old. 26 years old for Josh Jacobs. He RB15, give or take, which I think that's fair, a fair evaluation for him. He apparently with him, it's just seemingly like there's always this, okay, I have been a Raider. He was a tough situation last year, ultimately, found his way back that, come to some agreement. And I feel like for my money, that's what feels bound to happen almost. He returns to the Raiders. He's been such a focal point of that team for years and years and years now in that offense. I don't see why they really want to disrupt that. And I feel like they just figure out some way to bring him back, honestly. But, even so, assuming he stays with the Raiders, look, I think Josh Jacobs is a guy where I don't really see much change in where, in sentiment, I feel like in terms of the dynasty community and just much volatility in his value. I feel like, I mean, you look at the Raiders, if anything, he's had such an incredible workhorse, rate and volume that look, is it possible to repeat what he's been getting? If anything, that's I think a interesting question to keep in mind with Josh Jacobs. Where exactly he ends up, I think the Raiders. You guys let me know if you're watching live or on replay in the comments. Of course, as always, going to get responding to each and every one of you in the comments. We're growing the community 1K by draft day goal. I know it's lofty, I know it's crazy, but why not? Why the hell not? We're building something special. So moving on to quote unquote RB4 in terms of the art running backs of significance, Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard and the Dallas Cowboys. Is he going to be back? I've seen people talk about, the potential of him staying in Dallas and not departing, which I feel like is very interesting. I feel like I just don't necessarily see him there. I don't see him there. I really don't know where the Tony Pollard market might exactly be. So, you figure somebody's going to get him, and somebody I feel like look at the Lions of last year, the Montgomery contract. I feel like somebody gives him, maybe with the injury, the recent injury, it's not as crazy as the 4 years, 24. I know that sounds crazy. It's not really crazy, but by running back standards, it is, honestly. You think about he goes to somewhere for a 2, 3 year deal, 15, 20 million. I think that's reasonable for Tony Pollard. And I think there would be people willing to pay that price. Again, I think about players that are in the running back market. And let me pull up the banner again as my face just gets. How do you feel if a running back goes to Philly, Houston, Baltimore, or the Chargers? That's, I feel like, a very, very potential boost bump of a spot for these running back values. And you just look at I mean, and I could even throw Dallas in there, right? Throw Dallas, throw the Chiefs, throw the Bills, I mean, some team, they got to go somewhere and they're going to get some type of role. I think some type of fantasy relevant role. And with Tony Pollard, look, he's kind of right in that RB20, back end RB2 type value at the moment. And I think I, you know, landing spots very, very, very significant with Tony Pollard because if he does go somewhere nice, does go to, let's say, the Ravens, I mean, I see him going up into the cracking at least the top 20, the top 20 at the position. Any of these teams, I think for Tony Pollard, you're cracking the top 20 at the position without a doubt. I mean, you got to feel that way. With Austin Eckler, I think, look, the same holds. If he gets this type of Philly, Houston, Baltimore, Chargers type of value, he revitalizes himself, a guy that's just been totally, forgotten, and for a reason, given the lack of production there, but a guy that's basically it's gonna be his age 29 season, so he's not gonna be 30, not gonna be 30 just yet, but, RB 35-ish value right now in terms of community sentiment. I mean, you're looking at, again, just that, and we'll see how significant the contract is, I guess. That's important to note too. That'll be important to note how significant the contract is or is not, right? But if he goes in, even if it is that shorter term contract, if he goes to the right team, one of these teams, I can see him at least cracking the top 30, right? You realize a little bit of a gain, a little bit of a bump compared to where he's valued right now. It's just there's some uncertainty, and it's in some ways it is a game of musical chairs, right? It is a game of musical chairs. I've identified four teams here, kind of for my four top teams for running back landing spots. But not everybody can go to all these great places, right? So somebody's basically going to be the odd man out, I guess, in some lens, so to speak. But who's to say it's bound to be Eckler? And for argument's sake, it isn't, and he goes to one of these really good spots, you're looking at a guy that is top 30 easily. I mean, you look at where he comes into play, there's a lot of congestion with these rookie running backs, and that's, of course, something to very much keep in mind. We can look at how great these running backs and potential landing spots look right now. We'll see where they actually end up. And if there's somebody that gives them a run for their money in any round, in any type of NFL draft investment, I mean, we will see. Maybe you see these teams talk about musical chairs. Maybe teams just don't even really address it significantly of note in free agency with one of these top guys, and they just elect to get one of these rookies. But for argument's sake, I mean, I look at some of these rookies, you know, like a Blake Corum, Benson. We'll see where they exactly end up, right? But I could see Eckler jumping one or two to the extent where Eckler could be a bordering a fringe RB 24. Could be a back end RB2 again. I mean, look, just a crazy fall for Eckler this past season, but he's got the chance to rebound and to revitalize himself. So we will see. Time will tell. This is just meant to be. This video is really getting us thought provoking, anticipatory, what to expect, how to react, or just how to play the market, right? So with the running back position, I think it's, especially if you got one of these guys, just kind of wait and see, wait and see. There's, in many senses of the word, with these older veteran running backs, and I actually haven't even touched on a couple, which we'll get into in a minute, worth mentioning. With these running backs, it's such a disrespected, overlooked position, generally speaking, amongst NFL eyes and the valuation that they've really not put into the position. And I think almost that's in some ways trickled down to fantasy circles and just how the fantasy communities feel about running backs, right? Especially in the dynasty sense, it's like mirroring how NFL teams treat the position. So If you have one of these guys who are free agents, just hold them. Just hold. Hold the running back. Wait till these top guys start signing places. And if anything, look, if there's not really a market right now, why panic, sell somebody when the value is already at relative minimums? Just anticipate a wait for the potential for there to be an actual market, if that makes sense. So, with the running backs position specifically, I think guys just to keep in mind, just to mention, you're looking at a DeAndre Swift, who for the longest time I've assumed that he's going to be back with my Eagles. He is that kind of hometown connection, that hometown guy. We'll see. We'll see exactly where he goes. I, you know, the more and more it looks like it, and more you think about it, it looks like the Eagles, are players for all these other type of bigger name running backs who could be a lot of a kind of change in style to what we've seen with Swift. You know, I I feel like nonetheless with Swift, he's a younger guy relatively. He's 25. In that same year, he's kind of alongside CEH in that 25-year-old range. And talk about a guy, man, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Talk about a free fall. And I feel like why, some of the sentiment that drives running backs and just why you're scared in some sense of the word, right? But I I look at a guy like Swift who is firmly a top 24 running back right now, an RB2. We'll see where he goes, and we'll see how significant the contract is. I'm a little bit worried though with him, honestly. I'm kind of a little bit worried where if he doesn't go to one of these top places, maybe the opportunity isn't just quite as there. Maybe it's not quite as there, but I feel like he has to get some respect by teams. Of course, it is behind an incredible Philly Eagles line. So maybe I don't know how teams maybe view that relatively. How much work is he doing versus how much is he a beneficiary? That's I feel like such an interesting dilemma that in a dynamic we have to account for the running backs, especially. But nonetheless, RB22, I'm again hold, 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 hold. I'm holding on to Swift right now. No need to trade, no need to panic. Just let it play out. Let things play out. As is the case with look, older guys, older, but still not guys too much older than Swift. You're looking at a Singletary, a Madison, a Gus Edwards, a Deontay Foreman. I mean, a Kareem Hunt, Zach Moss. There's a host of guys that if the landing spot, a Gus Edwards, I think I just said him, but if I didn't, there's a host of guys where if things do break okay, where all of a sudden they especially if there's any case in a vacuum, how landing spot can influence and impact RB values. I mean, especially guys at the bottom, one of those guys gets basically a Rashad Penny type of deal. I mean, you could even think about that last year, and he did nothing, but you can capture you get the spot momentum, and that momentum starts to build in this off season where nothing, no football, no stats are being registered. Really, really bodes well for you, and just be able to capture some value, that artificial dynasty value, as Ray likes to put it over there, Ray GQ, Destination Debbie. Shout out to those guys, all those guys. I know they got a stream coming up, tuning into that, but that's pretty much does it, I think, for the RBs and just my cases I'm making there and important things to just keep in mind. Um, I think now let's move on to the receivers. And so with the receivers, look, I've highlighted some specifics with Ridley, Gabe Davis, Hollywood Brown. Those are kind of the top three for me. Top three that I feel like deserve some individual spotlight, right? Individual spotlight, we'll say, for some reason or another, for free agency reasons, because there seems to be a potential market for a Calvin Ridley in particular. I'm hearing, I brought it up. I've been talking about it for a little bit now in previous videos. You're looking at New England as a player for a receiver. And I'm hearing, look, they just had the Mac Jones trade. Another very interesting fantasy relevant, fantasy worth conversation with Mac Jones, with him leaving and not really changing all that much, not changing much at all in terms of the quarterback plans for the Patriots. And you see some of the top analysts and where kind of the narrative, I guess, where it is right now and what they're honestly, what they're hearing, you shout out to Daniel Jeremiah, and this context for the top 50 big boards, they're ranking, they rank these players with their eyes, right? With what they're seeing and kind of personal views and opinions. But then mock drafts, it very much becomes a function of what you're hearing, and especially at this time of year, right? With just the free agency in general and trying to get insight, just to look into I don't know what that was, kind of a spectacle or monocle there, I guess, but insight into what you think they might possibly do with the quarterback, especially with these not so great teams. And so the point being with the Patriots, it seems like it's the plan is some steam for sticking and picking at 3, which maybe it's fantasy players' worst nightmares, but say that they get a Calvin Ridley, still a respectable receiver in the NFL, very much so, and they draft a day 2 guy or 2, and you're looking at serviceable, okay weapons, and what's bound to be significant type investment for the young quarterback that they hope to transform their franchise. And maybe they sign a Jacoby Brissett, right? So I'm really, if anything, intrigued. I put these teams up here, and I know there's that kind of stink or it just doesn't feel maybe a little bit queasy. It doesn't feel that great with the Patriots, the Panthers, the Cardinals, the Giants, the Titans. Although honestly, the Cardinals, I guess more so this was especially with an eye towards some of the how the draft kind of lays itself out there. But with the Cardinals, especially, I guess you can say, look, it's not fair putting them necessarily here in this kind of grouping of teams. Although, if anything, maybe maybe some people think the opposite because they love how Trey McBride and what his future holds there in Arizona for the short, mid, long term. So I kind of maybe diverge. You can check out my trade targets to sell. Speaking of Mr. McBride there, but I look at the Cardinals, the point being, look, I think they have to go and get like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors at the 4th overall pick. So let's say it's a guy that's really wide receiver. It's like the 3rd option maybe in Arizona. So for argument's sake, that would be an interesting, very interesting. I don't know if I honestly, at that point, I don't want really that player compared to a guy that could be wide receiver 1 in these 4 other spots, if that makes sense. And let's say that team doesn't necessarily address wide receiver round 1 or early day 2, we'll say. So with Calvin Ridley, if we're just trying to play market predictor here, you're looking at a guy that is in and around the outskirts of wide receiver 3-ish. I think the right situation, for me. I like where he goes and bees and where he goes and is that wide receiver 1 in that offense. So for one of these teams, what might look like not so great toward dynasty communities, and that initial gut reaction, I'm actually gonna like that. I'm gonna potentially buy low. I'm going to like that buy low opportunity, to be honest. And so, yeah, you're looking at a guy that's way out of even wide receiver 36 right now, right? You're looking at Calvin Ridley, like wide receiver four type, wide receiver 48 in and around that range. I mean, the theme with these receivers, they might not really get too much of a bump right now, if at all. Maybe they kind of go down a little bit and people want to fade in some sense of the word. But I'm not ready to do that. I'm not going to be in that camp. I like, with the potential change of scenery and routes to where these receivers can be actual wide receiver, a one A, one B in potential NFL offenses. I mean, you got to search for that opportunity, right? You got to go for the opportunity. That's fundamentally the game we're playing, right? It's a fantasy game. You get targets, you get the chance to catch the ball, you get the chance to do something with the ball and accumulate yards, score touchdowns, how you score points, and how you win fantasy games, right? So with Gabe Davis, seems, out of Buffalo, you know, really doesn't seem like he's returning, as Ridley doesn't seem like he's returning to Jacksonville, and as Hollywood look not returning to the Cardinals. And I think receiver, it's really interesting because I feel like once you see them, unless you're Mike Evans, right? You rarely, it feels like see them return to that team, right? For a position that does, and I've seen, the arguments going around on Twitter, it's like interior defensive line receivers are getting the contracts right now and the kind of apple of NFL evaluators' eyes to a large degree in terms of what they want to dedicate their focus in terms of roster building, arguably. And so at that point, if you're not already almost kind of locked into a contract, or really obviously if you're not franchise tagged by a certain point, by the deadline, right? Then it's like you're as good as gone, right? You're gonna find a home somewhere else. And I mean, look, there's a bunch of guys with Evans, of course, off the board. Really interesting guys that I don't necessarily see as they're not gonna be game breaking fantasy players on your roster, but you give me a Ridley, a Davis, or a Hollywood Brown in one of these maybe not so attractive spots on the surface, but paths to an Adam Thielen type of season, right? Adam Thielen type of value. I mean, come on, you'll take that. You take that 10 times out of 10. And so you just, rounding out this receiver position, there's a host of guys, you want to mid, want to make fun and use that. Let's throw that word around mid. I mean, there's guys, there's the old guard, 30 plus A Rob, who just got released, of course, by the Steelers. You got OBJ. Um, you've got Randall Cobb. My God. I mean, you've got guys sub 30, like a Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd deserves some respect, I think. As Kurt Samuel, Boyd, MVS, Kendrick Bourne, Chark, Paris Campbell, Hardman, Josh Reynolds, Noah Brown, especially. Noah Brown, look, maybe he goes back to Houston. We'll see. We'll see. But guys that if you can capture a good landing spot, then it makes sense to sell. Because overwhelmingly, outside of these guys I've identified, I feel like the tenor is what are they going to do? What could they possibly do for your fantasy roster? If history says us, if history and their NFL careers to this point tell us anything, to be honest. So that's kind of the receiver rationale. I feel like with the receivers, it's like, okay, there's a couple guys that have a path to some fantasy relevance, but given where these guys are at, look, you're not talking, we're not talking the guys that have been tagged, which for argument's sake, let's totally address them because they're worth talking about with a T. Higgins and a Michael Pittman. It feels like okay, they'll try to work out a deal, a long-term deal. I feel like that's what the teams are going to do. But if they don't, then of course, there's still the tag and trade option. So none of these receivers, though, are in that tier or are anywhere close to the Pittman Jr., T. Higgins type of relevance. I mean, could they? Could they go to this, similar teams or the similar leaning spots? Yeah. But as far as fantasy relevance, I mean, outside of these kind of three guys at receiver, I mean, if you can capture any value in the coming weeks, people buying in, whatever bias maybe you can work within your leagues, who you're playing with, or you try to get a sense of who you're playing with. Capture on some sell high opportunities for receivers. I think that's kind of the theme of where we're at. So with the tight end position, with the tight end position, I mean, you got Everett, Gerald Everett, Mike Gesicki, and then you got Noah Fant. So not the most enticing tight ends, right? And if you are of significance, your team will not let you hit free agency. I feel like that's the theme of how things tend to play out at the tight end position. I mean, I'm trying to think of really any free agent transitions at the position, honestly, where it's really been meaningful. I mean, look, you've got the TJ Hawkinsons, change of scenery, but that was via trade, and that was obviously a value exchange there, where the team very much was after in the Vikings, and even an interdivisional trade, which is crazy. You don't see that often. I mean, tight end, you're just similar to receiver. It's almost like the pass catcher conundrum of okay, if they go somewhere nice on the surface, look to capture a sell high window. Look to capture people that are feeling good about a change of scenery for a Will Disley. I mean, it just sounds gross even saying it. I mean, a Jonathan Smith's a good example, honestly. He's actually a guy that, let go by the Falcons, and so he was able to sign. Goes there to Miami. And it seems like all is well and good for a Jonnu Smith. And speaking of which, let me just spotlight. Should have gotten the banner. Should have done this a while ago. The best. So, what team is the best for a tight end landing spot? And I mean, the Dolphins. Look, they're one of those nice examples of the perceptive. Oh, it's a nice team. It's a sexy offense. It's Mike McDaniel. It's Tyreek Hill. It's Waddle. It's Tua. It's A Chain. Well, the tight end. I mean, who's been their tight end? Durham Smythe, a guy out of Notre Dame, like a second, third, fourth year guy. That look, he is among the fewest at the position in the team. They target tight end at one of the lowest rates in the NFL. And so that with the Dolphins, it's almost a fool's gold situation where the Falcons, ironically, they targeted. I mean, that was the joke with the running joke with Arthur Smith. I mean, they were targeting the tight end position at a rate higher than anybody in the league. I mean, clear highest targeting tight end team in the NFL. And so now John leaves there and he goes to the Dolphins. I mean, if you can sell now, I would absolutely. If you can get anything for John Smith, I mean, for any of these guys, if you can get like a late second round, a third round rookie pick, I mean, come on, why not do it? Why not do it? No opportunity is necessarily guaranteed, and there's again the threat of rookies stepping in. A team drafts or signs an even undrafted free agent. I mean, there's guys that could be just from the psychology of these teams. I want to see something new. Give me something new at the position, and we'll see what we can do with it. Quite honestly, and it's just really interesting with the position. I mean, what team is the best for a tight end landing spot? And speaking of which, I do want to just pull up. I want to be clear. I want to identify. Look, let's just look at historically who is targeting tight ends. Who is targeting tight ends, and really, it's the Ravens, and especially Greg Roman of past with Mark Andrews and the type of years he's had of a few years ago. So when I think of the best team, I think it's got to be the Chargers, arguably. And so Gerald Everett, if he does resign, let's say, I'm liking Gerald Everett, but I'm using it potentially to sell high with these tight ends. But you look, who could realistically sign a tight end who doesn't already have one? It's a pretty dry market. There's not a lot of substance with these teams I'm going through. I mean, the Patriots, well, they just resigned Hunter Henry. I mean, looking at all these teams, I mean, seriously, they all have something or other at the position. But I mean, I look at the Chargers and I look at that Greg Roman system. I mean, that's got to be at the top for me. And I guess look, and Aaron Rodgers, look, the Jets did target at a top half, a top third ish of the league clip for the tight end position. So look, but they might be a player for Brock Bowers. So that's something I'm really monitoring with the tight end landing spots in general. And again, that's why Brock Bowers, in some sense of the word, has been so heavily connected, or was at least, to the Chargers for a little bit with the Greg Roman, with Harbaugh, just how they have liked to win, how they've liked to run things, so to speak. And I mean, I guess the Colts, they're interesting, they're intriguing as a potential tight end landing spot. They always have like five guys anyway, though. They've got a Will Mallory, a Jelani Woods, Ogletree, although I know there's something really dicey with him. I think a situation legally, but uh, even a Mo Alley Cox, it feels like he's still hanging around. Tight end, it's just like again with these receivers, and you look at the complexion of this class, you might as well hold them if you got them, and if they go somewhere nice, try to capture some value, try to capture some premium value at the position. So I think that effectively does it for the positional kind of breakdown for free agencies, for the significant ones at the very least. But we can try to predict, we can try to soothsay and anticipate as best as we can. It's ultimately going to be up to these teams, right? We're not going to dictate where these guys go. I guess we can be so vocal on Twitter, and maybe if you think however much or however far that goes, or maybe doesn't go, honestly. But with that being said, guys, hopefully if you're all watching on replay, enjoyed some insight or some thoughts into how things could possibly go with specific players, market sentiment, market prediction, anticipation. All we can do is be proactive. And I think that's the underlying, that's my philosophy. Trying to build value. That's a build value, the keys to long term sustained success, guys. And so, with that, look, I will see you guys in the next video. We got updated wide receiver rankings, which should be awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And yeah, updated rankings, some more, another league landscape on the horizon. Just let me know what you guys want, the type of content you want to consume, you want to watch. So, have a great weekend, guys. Peace.